for your eyes only. It's Roger Moore as Ian Fleming's James Bond 007.
Our spy ship was sunk in the Ionian Sea. She was equipped with ATAC.
Have we begun a salvage operation?
We asked Sir Timothy Havelock to secretly locate the wreck. He and his wife were killed by Hector Gonzalez. Police were able to identify Gonzalez by Melina, Sir Havelock's daughter.
As with most other films in the series, James Bond continued to be a massive hit with audiences worldwide. Moonraker grossed over $200 million after its theatrical run, becoming the most financially successful Bond film at that point. However, it received mixed reviews from critics for its abundance of campy humor and its outlandish storyline. Opting to bring the character back to his roots, or down to earth if you will, the filmmakers decided to return to the Cold War theme style of the previous films, with a variety of new and familiar faces to help with the production. Peter Lamont took over production design from Ken Adam and would do so for the next several films in the series. Albert Cubby Broccoli's stepson Michael G. Wilson stepped in to co-write the screenplay along with veteran Bond writer Richard Maybaum. And finally, John Glenn stepped into the director's chair and would go on to direct all the Bond films of the 1980s, beginning with 1981's For Your Eyes Only.
This Bond is for your eyes only. No one comes close to 007. When 007 comes close to you.
For Your Eyes Only returns to a traditional approach in the way Bond films are made. It was more realistic, had little to no gadgets involved in the story, and in general is just more grounded than the previous setting of Moonraker. The film's plot is actually inspired by two separate stories featured in one collection, For Your Eyes Only and Rusico, both of which were written by Ian Fleming. It was also the fifth film to feature Roger Moore in the role, and at this point it was unknown as to whether Moore would return or not. He had initially signed a contract for 3 films, which ended with The Spy Who Loved Me, and future films were negotiated on a case-by-case basis. Various actors were considered to be a potential replacement for Moore, including Lewis Collins, Ian Ogilvy, and Michael Billington, who was actually featured in a minor role in The Spy Who Loved Me. Ultimately, however, the replacement never came to be, as Moore ended up returning to the role. For Your Eyes Only would end up marking a return to form of sorts for the series, with its realistic approach to storytelling reminiscent of past Bond films in ways both good and bad.
Stinging in the rain.
That's not funny, 007.
The film starts with a really interesting opening. Bond goes to visit the grave of his deceased wife Tracy, making this the second reference to On Her Majesty's Secret Service in Moore's Bond catalog. He pays his respects and proceeds to leave the cemetery after apparently being summoned for a mission. However, it turns out to be a trap as he gets stuck inside a helicopter with a dead pilot being remote controlled by an off-camera bad guy. Even though the baddie in this case is not named, it's pretty obvious after seeing the cat that it's meant to be Ernst Blofeld. For the sake of this video, we'll call him Ernie. During production of the film, Kevin McClory publicly announced that he was planning to reboot Thunderball, with Blofeld being one of the main villains of his film. Due to copyright restrictions relating to Thunderball, Blofeld had been absent from Eon-produced Bond films since Diamonds Are Forever. Not wanting to repeat another potential lawsuit, Cubby deliberately avoided naming the villain in the opening as a sort of jab to McClory, basically to prove a point that he didn't need to use Blofeld in order to have a good Bond film. Anyway, legal drama aside, the opening scene is pretty decent. It provides simple but effective suspense as Bond tries to regain control of the aircraft, combined with authentic miniatures provided once again by Derek Mettings. The dialogue, however, is another story. When Bond finally catches Ernie just before he's disposed of, he says the weirdest line of dialogue I can recall hearing in the series.
We can do a deal! I'll buy you a delicatessen in stainless steel!
The first time I heard it, I thought I misheard him. A delicatessen in stainless steel? What the hell does that mean? Well, apparently it's another one of Cubby's jibes directed to McClory, this time referring to a mafioso term with basically anyone who had a delicatessen with top-of-the-line quality food and easily cleaned stainless steel was doing pretty well for themselves business-wise. I could see Ernie wanting to offer money or resources that MI6 didn't have, but a deli meat store? Hopefully Bond isn't a vegetarian.
Mr. Bond!
After the sequence, we get the opening titles of the film, along with the title theme performed by Sheena Easton. This is the first film in the series to feature the performer itself in the actual film, so it's sort of like a fancy music video in this sense. Longtime title designer Maurice Binder opted to include Easton in this way simply because he liked her appearance and thought she would suit the film's aesthetic. While I do think she is very attractive, the theme itself leaves much to be desired. It's another one of those slow, brooding themes that puts me to sleep in the same way that Moonraker did. The instrumentation is fine, and Easton is definitely a talented singer, so it's not a terrible song by any means. But for the love of dry martinis, why did the filmmakers continue to insist on using slow ballads for a big-budget action film? This is something I'd play if I wanted a sleep aid, not something to get me hyped up for a spy on a mission with a license to kill. In fact, For Your Eyes Only happens to be another film in the series that initially had an alternate theme, this time performed by the rock band Blondie. Man, how do we keep missing out on these gems? Once this is over, we see a British naval ship in the Ionian Sea with staff going on about their business when it ends up getting sunk by an old naval mine accidentally trawled in netting. How they didn't pick this up on radar sooner, I don't know, but hey, we gotta get a plot somehow. After this, Bond is informed about the ship sinking and that it contains a valuable device known simply as the ATAC, the MacGuffin of the film, which is used to coordinate missile strikes from Polaris submarines. MI6 fears that the Soviets may retrieve the ATAC to use their missile systems against them and gain an edge in the Cold War, so Bond is ordered to retrieve it first, kickstarting the film's events. At the same time, we are introduced, rather unconventionally I might add, to the lead Bond girl of the film, Melina Havelock, played by French actress and former face of Chanel No. 5, Carole Bouquet. She has a brief reunion with her family, the father of which is asked to secretly assist with the location of the sunken ship before they're killed by a hitman by air. Melina survives the assault and embarks on a quest for revenge on behalf of her parents, though not before weirding us out a bit. Okay then. I know the film has eyes in the title, but does it have to be taken so literally? In all seriousness though, Bouquet does a good job in the role of Melina. She plays an active role in assisting Bond in his mission, while also trying to avenge her family at the same time, and their differing goals occasionally cause some dramatic conflict between the two. She's one of the few Bond girls that can manage to take care of herself, even coming equipped with her own signature weapon in the form of a crossbow. The pair travel frequently together as they search for a man named Emilio Locke, who is ultimately responsible for her parents' deaths, as well as an associate of the film's main villain. Despite this, however, I can't help but feel her character is underutilized. The romance between the two characters is barely acknowledged at all. They have a few sweet moments together, but they never really go anywhere with them. Hell, they don't even kiss until the very last scene of the film. And there are multiple times throughout the story where Bond tells Melina to wait for him to finish the job, or at least suggests it.
Go back to the Triana and wait. Let me find out what I can here, then I'll come straight to Corfu, I promise you.
Okay, I'll go back and wait.
You'd better go back to the sub and wait.
This is weird for Bond to say, considering she saves his behind on a few occasions and is more than capable of taking on a goon. It really is a shame that the relationship between her and Bond is so undercooked. Even in Moonraker, with Goodhead's boring personality, she at least established the terms of her relationship with Bond while acknowledging her attraction to him. Melina is a decent enough character, and it's nice that the writers wanted to make her more involved in the story, but I would have loved to see more initiative taken with developing a proper romance between the two, as well as Bond not worrying so much about her abilities.
The Chinese have a saying. Before setting out on revenge, you first dig 2 graves.
I don't expect you to understand. You're English. But I'm half Greek. And Greek women, like Electra, always avenge their loved ones.
As for the villain of the film, that's another matter entirely. Initially, Bond is set up to meet with a Greek businessman named Eris Christados, played by Julian Glover. He tells Bond that he needs to look for a man named Milos Colombo, known in the criminal underworld by his nickname the Dove, and is said to be the man responsible for the deaths of the Havelock family. He initially works as a sort of background liaison assisting Bond, but turns out to be the actual villain of the film as the story develops. His evil plot is pretty basic in that he's only interested in retrieving the ATAC so he can sell it to the Soviets for a hefty price. I guess it's understandable that they wanted to keep the plot more basic after how crazy Moonraker was, but why did it have to be done by this guy? This balding middle-aged dude looks way too ordinary to be a Bond villain. I guess he does make up for it a bit by having other goons do his dirty work, but they're all just as bland as he is. I honestly have trouble coming up with things to talk about as far as villains are concerned because there's really not much else to say. Part of the fun of watching the Bond films was seeing how eccentric the bad guys were. You got an aristocratic fat cat obsessed with gold, an occultist drug lord, and of course Ernst Blofeld being the classic example of a Bond villain. Even side characters like Red Grant and Jaws got plenty of time for themselves to shine too. But here, Christados has got nothing going for him personality-wise. Look at how he compares to Emilio Largo from Thunderball when their henchmen are eaten by sharks.
You let him get the better of you. No! He was a baby! He was also gonna girl! No! 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 Leave him!
There's simply no menace or personality behind the role. It's just a plain, ordinary bad guy. Glover does a great job where he can, but he can't escape the lame writing of his character. As far as Bond villains are concerned, this is the most disappointing yet. Thankfully, the not villain Colombo offers a much needed dose of personality to offset the blandness of the other characters. He's performed by Chaim Topol, best known for his Oscar-nominated performance in Fiddler on the Roof. He works as a smuggler of off-brand products and tobacco who used to be partnered with Christados until they split and became enemies. He is first introduced while paired with his mistress Lizelle, performed by Cassandra Harris, who was actually married at the time to future Bond actor Pierce Brosnan. Colombo reminds me a lot of Tiger Tanaka from You Only Live Twice. It's just a blast to watch him do anything on the screen, especially helping Bond hunt down Locke halfway through the film. He also has the interesting gimmick of constantly eating pistachio nuts. Why? Because Topol wanted them, that's why. What, you need an actual reason? Seriously, you take one look at that cheeky grin and he's already won your heart. Unfortunately, he doesn't have as much screen time as the other characters, but he makes the most of what he can get and has a ton of charisma to boot. Or, as Colombo would say, Thrasos.
You may need this. I'm a good judge of men. Mr. Bond, you have what the Greeks call Thrasos, guts.
Serve you, Mr. Colombo.
Cheers.
Yasu.
Now, let's talk about the good things this film has going for it. To start, the soundtrack is great. It's got a nice upbeat tone to it while mixing in some 80s synth here and there. The film was composed by Bill Conti, best known for his work on the Rocky series, and it's a nice change of pace from the usual big brass associated with John Barry. It always seems like there's some music playing even during the quieter parts of the film, which could get annoying for some, but for me it didn't make that much of a difference. The music complements the action well, which I have to say is also a refreshing change of pace. After all the glitz and glamour of the last few Bond films, it's nice to see less explosions this time around, in favor of good old-fashioned suspense and stunt work. The best example as far as suspense is concerned is the scene where Bond is climbing up the mountain to Christados' hideout. To this day, I still get sweaty palms watching the scene. Bond almost meets his maker twice, the first of which is through a jump scare with a dove, and what would also become a trademark in all of John Glenn's future Bond films. The second brush with death occurs as Bond reaches the top, only to be kicked off by a goon and barely saved by his gear. The stunt was performed by Rick Sylvester, who had previously doubled for Bond in the ski jump from The Spy Who Loved Me, and whose nerves nearly got the better of him for this stunt. Jesus, somebody get this guy a medal. The car chase also gets a thumbs up for me. The Lotus Esprit makes its second appearance in the series, but ends up getting torched by a goon trying to break into it. It's hilarious to watch, though I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt me in the childhood. Bond and Melina are forced to squash into her Citroen 2CV, and this is where Bill Conti's soundtrack really won me over. The chase is classic. Lots of detours, lots of idiots going topsy-turvy, and it's hilarious to see that old piece of crap Citroen get smashed into a pulp, yet somehow manage to stay on the road. The two even get by with a little help from their friends in the form of random villagers. And of course we get the odd one-liner here and there just to top things off.
Love a drive in the country, don't you?
My personal favorite action sequence is the whole bout that happens in Cortina. It goes from one highlight to the next and keeps going for like 15 minutes. It has everything from goons flying off bikes to gun standoffs and another classic ski scene with more expert camera work by Willy Bogner. It even has a split-second moment where the drunkard from the last two movies reappears for the third and final time in the series. Blink and you'll miss him. I'll admit, I was surprised to see this film willing to go so far back to basics, at least in terms of action. It reminded me a lot of Dr. No and On Her Majesty's Secret Service when watching it, in a good way. It has just enough visual spectacle to keep things interesting, without relying on them so much to carry the story of the film to the end.
You left this with Ferrara, I believe. Had no head for heights.
Unfortunately, said story brings to mind the things I dislike about this film. If it hadn't been for Roger Moore, I would have assumed I was watching a completely different movie that was totally unrelated to James Bond. Aside from a few of the action sequences which are really well done, there isn't anything that makes this film stand out. The story itself feels like it starts off on the right foot, even if the whole reason why it happened was a complete fluke. Once we get told about the ATAC, however, the film makes a complete 180 and changes direction almost immediately after starting, shifting the focus to investigating the people responsible for the murder of Melina's family. Don't you think that maybe there's something more important at stake here? Like, I don't know, the Soviet Union gaining control of British submarine fleets? I understand Melina's father was connected to the mission to find the ATAC, that's all well and good, but why not search for the ATAC first, then solve the murder after? I'm not a military expert by any means, but it's not inconceivable to think that a British military intelligence ship would have had its coordinates broadcast to its base back on shore. Why not just search its last known position and get there before the Soviets do? And you want to know the funny thing about all this? Bond and Melina managed to find those coordinates about an hour and a half into the film just by looking through her father's diary, which means the answer was always there from the beginning. Why didn't she think to look through it earlier? That would have saved a lot of trouble, not to mention a lot of pointless screen time. The story gets even more cliched when Bond and Melina go to these coordinates and successfully locate the ATAC, only to end up being attacked underwater. While the action in this scene is great, I still find myself rolling my eyes. Why is it that when the hero finds something important, the villain is always quick to appear and steal their thunder? And how is Christados able to find the ship's coordinates anyway? I know he's working with the KGB and they have access to certain resources, but finding the ship without knowing the exact coordinates would mean having to scour the entire bottom of the Ionian Sea and just hoping to find it before they do. It's an absurd premise, made even more absurd when Bond and Melina end up losing the ATAC despite escaping from Christados and learn of his secret hideout from a parrot. Seriously, the entire balance of Cold War nuclear supremacy hinges on a blue macaw named Max. Sure, it makes for a cute LOL moment, but what kind of drugs were they on when they came up with this? Even the smartest birds in the world require practice for several days, weeks, or even years before they can speak a few words. Maybe I'm nitpicking a little too much, but this is supposed to be a traditional, down-to-earth, back-to-basics Bond film. If they were planning to make Bond more realistic this time around, they should have kept things simple and focused on the ATAC rather than trying to throw this whole revenge angle in the middle of the story and complicating things. I can understand wanting to give a purpose for the Bond girl to be around and help Bond, but shifting the plot back and forth so much really ruins the pacing of the story for me. Oh, and while we're on the subject with Bond girls, let's give an honorable mention for one of the worst Bond girls in the series, BB Doll, performed by former ice skater Lynn Holly Johnson. Now, I'm not necessarily against age gap relationships, but this woman acts like a total child. Seeing her interact with Bond in any sexual way just feels wrong. I can't put my finger on it, but there's just something really weird about how these two are written together. Even Bond gets the heebie-jeebies.
Don't you like me?
Why, I think you're wonderful, Bibi, but I don't think your Uncle Harry would approve.
Him? He thinks I'm still a virgin.
Yes, well, you get your clothes on. I'll buy you an ice cream.
Now, for all my complaining, you probably think I hate this film, but I don't. In fact, I was able to sit through this film 3 times in preparation for this review, which puts me in a reasonable position to talk about it. If you can forgive the bland characters, the bland story, and just the overall blandness in general, you can find things to enjoy about it. The suspenseful action scenes are still fun to watch, the music is super catchy, and Roger Moore's charisma always elevates the mood even in the worst of scenes. It's a mediocre film with a few redeeming factors, which for me puts it just slightly above average. It makes sense that the filmmakers wanted to steer away from the sci-fi extravaganza that was Moonraker, but it seems in the process they went from an ordinary Bond film to extraordinary, and I don't mean in a mind-blowing kind of way. Ultimately, however, it's a harmless film. Its story is riddled with cliches, but hell, most action movies were during this decade. I don't really recommend it for casual Bond fans, but it's not that bad either. There are definitely worse films in the series. So if you just want to turn your brain off and enjoy some mindless fun, I say go ahead and check it out. Just make sure to share the experience with a friend, because it shouldn't be for your eyes only. This concludes my review of For Your Eyes Only. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, stay tuned for the next part.
Give us a kiss! Give us a kiss!
Well, really, Mr. Bond.
I think we're having a little trouble with the line, madam.
Give us a kiss!
You idiot. Get on to it. 007. 007.
Bond! Have you got a man? What's going on? Bond!